I recently recorded an ambient rock EP in my New York City apartment. There are many options to record music in the box nowadays, like guitar modeling, plugins, and drum sequencers, for example, but I was set on using as close as possible to the real instruments. Now, unfortunately, since I have neighbors, cranked tube amps and real drums aren't exactly an option, so I had to make adjustments and compromises. In this video, I'll walk you through my setup to record rock instruments silently at home. But before we do that, let's look at some reasons why you would want to set up a silent recording studio. You get really close to the sound and responsiveness of tube amps and a real drum set. It's quiet enough that I haven't pissed off my neighbors yet, and you can do separate headphone mixes for each instrument. That also means that you can play and record at any time of the day. I've played drums past 1 a.m. without any complaints. There's no interference from outside noise when recording, which is a huge problem for me in the city with horns and sirens. Finally, there's no need to set up and break down microphones and do gain staging whenever you want to play and record music. Everything is always set up and ready to go, which also gives you consistency in your sound as an artist. Before we jump in, if you're interested in checking out the EP I recorded, follow the links in the description or check it out right here. The first challenge is that for this type of music, acoustic drums are just too loud for my apartment. So my solution is to use electronic drums. Now, this is the main compromise here, especially if you're a drummer, but I will say that electronic drum sounds have come a really long way since I started making music. This is what the drums sound like directly in the room without speakers. And this is the drum's DI sound in Logic. Now in my case, I have the Roland VAD drums with the TD17 module and a custom kit I created. Not only do they sound, feel, and look great, but they're also quiet enough that you can play them in an apartment. Keep in mind that there are cheaper alternatives that are perfectly suited for a silent recording studio, as well as much more expensive ones. Last but not least, I'm using the stereo outs of the module instead of using MIDI because I prefer the sound and responsiveness of the module over the plugins that I have. Now, the other main challenge is that as a guitarist, I'm really picky about my gear and tone and wanted to use my tube amps to record. Now, those sound best at higher volumes, but that just wouldn't be possible in my apartment. For example, my 15-watt head is loud enough to do a bar gig. So my solution is to use an amp attenuator with a DI. I'm using the Tone King Ironman 2, but there's various options in the market like the Captor X or the Aux Box. This lets me get the sound characteristics and feel of a tube amp while still being able to control the volume in the room. This is what my 15-watt all-tube orange amp head sounds like, completely cranked in the room with the speaker and some attenuation. But keep in mind you can disconnect the speaker and record DI. And this is what it sounds like in Logic. Bass is pretty pretty straightforward because I like how direct and punchy a DI bass sound is. But if you want to record an actual bass amp, a lot of them nowadays offer a DI out, so that's an option. Next, for keyboards and synths, I used both hardware and plugins. On the hardware side, I used the Synthstrom Deluge as a Rhodes and as the main DAW for one of the songs. And on the software side, I used Native Instruments Complete Kontrol keyboards along with various MIDI plugins. Now, I didn't record any vocals for my EP, but there are ways to record great vocals in an apartment or a silent studio, like using a vocal shield, for example. Finally, there's a few other instruments in there, like a shaker, that I recorded using a handheld mic. Tying it all together is your audio interface. Since I'm going mostly with DI instruments, I went with an interface that had as many line inputs as possible, which lets me have all my instruments plugged in all the time. My interface is the Arturia Audiofuse 16 rig, which has plenty of inputs and great routing capabilities. For example, when I'm recording guitar, I can also grab a DI signal straight from the guitar on top of the one from the amp so that I can reamp it through plugins like Helix Native or Neural DSP. Finally, for monitoring, I have the option to use either my speakers or headphones for extra flexibility. This was my approach at building a silent recording studio in my apartment. Like and subscribe if it was helpful, and feel free to comment if you have any questions on setting up your own. See you in the next one.